All right. Good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning. And welcome to Daring Dialogues. I am your host, Shantae Charles. I hope that everybody is having a great and wonderful day. We are on with our Friday segment. Most of you all who know and are familiar with our program know that every day we cover something different. Mondays we cover motivation, usually, except for this Monday. Tuesday we cover Black history and history in general. Wednesdays we cover relationships, those that are married, engaged, single, and just healthy relationship building. But right now we're on the married and those who are single. Thursday we cover theology, we cover doctrine, we cover the Bible, we cover worldviews, what other people around the world believe. And then Fridays we cover wealth, health, finance, and all of that. All right. So every day of the week, depending on what you're interested in, you can join us Monday through Friday like most people do, or you could just join us for specific days of the week for subject matter that you are interested in. All right. I should be doing a whole lot better today on my YouTube live stream. It seems to be going well. And I believe I have enough charge that I shouldn't have the problem I had yesterday with the battery going out. So I want to say good morning to everyone. Good morning to you. All right. I hope that you are having a great and wonderful morning. We're going to jump right in. As I said, because we're covering cash, capital, and credit, it is important for us to understand the relationship of Black America to the system of cash, capital, and credit. In case you don't know your history, I'm here to remind you that Black people have a very unique relationship with cash, capital, and credit in this country because our ancestors were the cash, the capital, and the credit. And you can find out a lot more about that in this book called The History of the Black Dollar by Angel Rich. And today I'm going to be sharing with you about the Freedmen's Bank. The Freedmen's Bank. All right. I'm also going to go back over the parts of what is in your credit score. All right. What is in your credit score? I redrew my little graph today, and I believe we're going to start out by covering payment history in detail today. And then we're going to end by talking about, we're looking at the book, The Capitalist Code. The Capitalist Code. All right. And then we're going to finish up by talking about, we started talking about investment, and he's now talking about the genius of Warren Buffett. So we'll get into that if we have time at the end of today. All right. If we don't, next week we will start in the opposite direction and we will cover the capitalist code first. So let's jump in and let's talk to you today about the Freedmen's Bank, a little bit of history here about Black banking. All right. The legacy of the Freedmen's Bank serves as a reminder that we must continue striving for greater financial inclusion for all Americans. Secretary Jacob Lew, and that is L-E-W. The Freedmen's Bank was created by U.S. Congress and the Freedmen's Bureau on March 3rd, 1865, to help freedmen transition from slavery to freedom. Because obviously this was going to be a huge undertaking to have roughly 4 million people released without property, without a home, right? Without a guaranteed job, right? And they had children and families that they had to take care of. So just releasing people in saying you're free to go, you're no longer under the bonds of slavery, was not enough. All right? And anybody who's thinking that, well, they're free to go now, then they should be able to just, quote unquote, pick themselves up by their own bootstraps, which is a famous saying that people like to say about helping yourself. Well, if you don't have boots, as Martin Luther King aptly put it, it is a cruel jest to tell someone to pick themselves up by their own bootstraps. All right? So this bank, all right, was established to help freedmen transition from slavery to freedom. Before the emancipation, many blacks in the border states found freedom in the Union Army and held employment. Northern abolitionists called for a freedmen's bank to help ex-slaves develop financial responsibility. For those of you who may not have been taught that, okay? During the Civil War, numerous small banks were established to receive deposits from black soldiers and runaway slaves working for the Union throughout the South. Good morning to beloved. Deposit receipts would often get lost, and it frequently prevented freedmen from retrieving their deposits. So now, those who are trying to be responsible, right, and they are trying to take their payment that they received while they were in the Army, whatever small piece they were paid, they'd go and they deposit it in this bank, and now all of a sudden your bank has no record of the monies that you deposited. Also, when blacks were killed in battle and did not list a family relative, their deposits often went unclaimed. I wonder how much unclaimed money is still out there. Good question. Sometimes, even when relatives were named, finding their location would be even more difficult since the war had disrupted so many families. Congregational minister John W. Alvord and A.M. Sperry, an abolitionist, launched the Freedmen's Savings and Trust Company in 1864 to reduce banking inaccuracies and bring all deposits from blacks under one large institution. Because if you continue to be cheated, after a while, you're going to get tired of that, and you're going to have to figure out another system whereby you can actually have your funds, have your monies, and retain them. Okay? So it's not enough that free labor occurred for several hundred years, but even after free labor, you're still stealing from people that are just now starting to, quote unquote, earn some economy. Think about that. Congress passed legislation to incorporate the bank, with President Lincoln immediately signing the bill into law. To support the land grants and other elements of Freedmen Bureau's Act, a Freedmen's Bank was established to help newly freed Americans navigate their financial lives. It was considered the financial literacy program for blacks. But how many of us know we needed more than just a bank and somewhere to put our money? The bank only received deposits by or on behalf of persons held in slavery in the United States or their descendants. Interestingly, up to 7% interest was allowed for deposits, and unclaimed accounts were pooled into a charitable fund that was used to educate children of ex-slaves. All right. In 1868, black staffers were trained to take over the bank's operations and headquarters, and it was moved to Washington, D.C. The new location was positioned across from the U.S. Department of Treasury in a grand building that cost $260,000 to construct. It's a little known fact that Lincoln personally asked for it to be moved so that it could be close to him. His fondness for the bank would ultimately contribute to its demise. Freedmen's Bank was one of the first multi-state banks in the nation, with 37 branches in 17 states and D.C. at its highest moment of operation. By 1870, nearly all local branches were managed by blacks. At its height, the bank had over $57 million in deposits, adjusted for inflation, and 70,000 depositors. 5 weeks after the creation of the Freedmen's Bank, President Lincoln was assassinated. Let's see. You're helping these people get freedom. You're signing bills that allow them to begin the journey of financial freedom and stability. Yeah, you're going to be probably assassinated. Martin Luther King, as soon as he decided to go and establish the Poor People's Campaign to help black people financially and economically, guess what happened? They just commemorated it. I won't say celebrated. They just commemorated it this week. 57 years later, in 1872, U.S. Congress voted to permanently close the Freedmen's Bureau. While the bank remained operational, economic instability ripened. People started to notice the large amount of fraud from upper management that was taking place at the bank, bringing it down and creating the Panic of 1873. To save the bank, Frederick Douglass was elected its president in 1874. When Douglass arrived at the bank in Washington, D.C., he wrote, "The whole thing was beautiful. I had read of this bank when I lived in Rochester and had indeed been solicited to become one of its trustees and had reluctantly consented to do so. But when I came to Washington and saw its brownstone front, its towering height, its perfect appointments, and the fine display it made in the transaction of its business, I felt like the Queen of Sheba when she saw the riches of Solomon that half had not been told me." As president, Douglass found profound corruption within the bank and poorly calculated investments across industries being made with depositor savings. Desperate to cease the bank's instability and volatility, Douglass invested $10,000 of his personal savings. Sadly, this was for naught, as the bank could not compete with the political forces that destroyed the Reconstruction era. Although Douglass pleaded for Congress to intervene, on June 22, 1874, the bank was officially closed. At the date of closing, over $2.9 million was due to 61,144 depositors, $48.72 on average. In 2017, this would be equivalent to roughly $100 million total and on $1,500 on average due to each customer that held funds at the bank. The federal government kept all the money, collapsing the bank and leaving all the account holders penniless. So, when you want to understand and trace generationally why black people have problems with banks, why black people like to stuff their money in mattresses and pillows and in between Bible pages, all right? Why sometimes it's like tooth and nail to get black people to get a bank account, trace it back, all right? Sometimes we don't spend the time to understand black people's relationship with money and why they act the way they act in this country, all right? So I want you to think about that. Think. All right? These people did not get a financial literacy training. They didn't get an investment training. All right? All they got was, here's an institution, put your money here, which is a whole lot different than actual financial literacy and training. In Washington, D.C. alone, over 3,000 depositors, both individuals and cultural institutions, lost their savings. So again, when we talk about building wealth in this country, you have to look at what were some of the setbacks to us building wealth. Not only were people being physically attacked, not only were people being run off of land, right? Not only did we have things that occurred like lynchings of business owners and their inheritors of their business, but you also had things like this. The federal government kept all the money. Okay? They didn't pay out anything. They collapsed the bank. And those who had invested their savings in this bank including cultural institutions, not just individuals, lost their savings. So what does that mean? That means they have to start over again. Now you keep doing that generation after generation, keep making people start over and see what happens to the wealth gap. All right. So when people talk about there's a 220-year wealth gap and they just don't know how it happened and they just don't understand why black people as a whole have not managed to climb out of the financial hole, we're looking at, and that's why we're reading some of these things so you can understand. All right. The tragedy of Freedmen's Bank left most blacks with a huge feeling of distrust of the American banking system that is still prevalent in 2017. So the question then becomes, is their distrust unfounded? Well, clearly not. Because if I'm trying to work within the financial institutions, if we're trying to establish institutions, and I'm trying to work within the framework of what you all say works, and then you sabotage that, I would probably hold some distrust in your systems as well. All right. One of the major problems that black people are facing right now is many African Americans, they put their money in a bank. Some people have been with the same bank, right? Maybe 5, 10, 15, 20 years. I know my husband and I are getting up there with how long we've been in our bank. But sometimes you go to these same banks that you're investing your funds in, and then you ask for a loan or you ask for credit and you still can't get it. So what is the point then of housing my funds in a place that if I need to withdraw funds or if I need to receive a loan, I can't receive a loan from the same bank that I've been investing my funds in that are literally drawing interest on my money. All right. These are things that people have to think about when you're talking to African Americans about financial planning and investing. These are things that you're going to run up against. All right. Nevertheless, the records of the bank depositors serve as a source for black family researchers to better discover the progression of blacks during Reconstruction era that followed the American Civil War. In fact, 29 branches of Freedmen's Bank records are still available today and searchable via the National Archives. So you might even be able to find out if your relative invested in this bank. Interestingly, these records are thousands of signature cards that contain personal data about the individual depositors. In addition to the names and ages, the files can contain their places of birth, their residence and occupations, the names of their parents, spouses, children, brothers, and sisters. Amazing how they got all that information and in the end, they got screwed over. And in some cases, the names of former slave owners. These records of the individuals who lived through the transition from slavery to freedom are the keys that allow our descendants to unlock the mysteries of their largely undocumented family histories. I would also venture to say you could probably use this information for the future for other purposes, which would be, yeah, we're not going to talk about that today, but we will talk about it. Within these records are stories that reveal struggle, sacrifice, courage, and determination, stories that must be told to our children and left for future generations. We're at the point now where we don't just need a story, right? We need repair. I know, somebody can drop off right now. At this point, we don't just need the story of who was at the bank. We need some repair to happen for the descendants of the people who were at that bank whose monies were hijacked by the federal government and never returned to them. I'd like to see that. I think that can be done. Since you have all of the genealogical record on those cards, those signature cards, you can probably trace whether or not that person has living descendants. And if they do, you can figure out how the government is going to repair the damage that was done to that family. In In 1879, Blanche Kelso Bruce became the first black and only former slave to preside over the U.S. Senate. He was also the first black whose signature appeared on currency as Register of the Treasury in 1881. In 1888, Capital Savings Bank became the first bank founded and operated by blacks. On January 7th, 2016, with the assistance of former mayor of Atlanta and senior advisor to Martin Luther King Jr., Secretary Lew publicly renamed the Treasury Annex Building the Freedmen's Bank Building in honor of the site where the Freedmen's Savings Bank once stood. Again, at this point, we don't just need things named in our honor. At this point, we need repair. Not just the naming of a building. Because this is what America has gotten used to doing. Oh yeah, we ripped you off. We hijacked you a little. But here's a building. Here's a building in your name. To remember, to commemorate how we yeah. We got to stop doing that, America. And as black people, we got to stop accepting it. Can I just be real? Appeasement. That's nice that you want to remember that we had a bank. But what about dealing with the fact that this bank closed and left everybody broke? How about we deal with that? All right. Your score. Remember this? We talked about what is in your score. Here it is. 35% of your credit score is your payment history. About 30% has to do with the amounts you owe. 15% has to do with how long your credit history is, how long you've been building credit. 10% has to do with the variety of credit you have. And then 10% has to do with the types of credit you have. We are reading from the book, Your Score, an insider's secret to understanding, controlling, and protecting your credit score. And remember, we talked about this before, that a lot of opportunity has moved from letters to numbers. Whether that's your credit score, whether that is your SAT testing score, all of those different things, people like to determine who you are around a number. And sometimes you don't get further than that number because that is what people are looking at. So when we say what's in your score, let's take a look at a couple of pieces today. We're going to talk about payment history. We're going to talk about amounts owed. And we're going to talk about length of credit history. If we have time, we will finish up with the variety of credit and new credit. All right. But I'm just going to read through and we'll stop where we need to. Payment history. Whether or not you pay your bills on time is obviously a big concern to a potential lender. So it's probably not a surprise that payment history is given the greatest weight in your credit score. One of the first questions I get from a new client is about the relative pain of a late or missed payment. How late does it have to be before it really hurts you? And what is the relative damage a missed payment causes? Like most answers, it all depends. Technically, any loan payment that is more than 30 days late can be reported to the credit bureaus for delinquency. But for practical purposes, that almost never happens. Companies usually report all of their data to the bureaus on the same day every month, and your payment is unlikely to be due on or around that date. Many companies don't even report monthly, so being just shy of 30 days late with a payment and getting it in before the next payment request is mailed is not going to do much damage. But it's safe to say that if you actually miss 2 payments, you'll be dinged on your credit report with an annotation in the 30 days past due column, which we'll talk about later in detail. And if you miss 3 payments, you're going to be taken out of the 30 days past due category and listed in the 60 days past due category. 4 missed payments means you've moved into the 90 days past due category, which means you're now technically in default. Even worse, the effect of each of those categories isn't simply a doubling or tripling of the damage to your credit score. Each jump to a new category is an exponential amount of pain to your credit score. Many of the clients come in with serious problems they need to fix, so they're usually very interested in exactly what kind of damage a 90-day or delinquent account can do for your score. That also depends. If you come in with a great credit and all of a sudden you have a delinquency, your score will get pounded, often by more than 100 points. That's because the delinquency is reporting a change of your circumstance. You used to be a great risk, but now you're showing a lot more reason to worry. If you have had bad credit, however, that delinquency is pretty much already priced into your score. It'll hurt you, but probably not, to the tune of around 20 points as opposed to 100. It's important to mention that all of these penalties are specific to your credit score, not your standing with your lender. For example, many credit card companies will hit you with a penalty interest rate if you miss a payment, even if they don't report you as delinquent to the credit bureaus. Your credit score stays the same, but now you're paying way more in interest because you made a mistake. There's nothing to the old myth that you have to carry balances on your cards in order to improve your score. But one thing you do have to do to prove a good payment history on a particular account is to actually use the account. In other words, if you have a credit card that you don't ever charge anything on, the account will show up as inactive on your credit report, and you won't get the benefit of the great payment history. You don't have to do anything crazy. Just make a small purchase each month with each of your cards and pay them off in full at the end of the cycle. I'm also not in favor of keeping debt when you can get rid of it, but under certain circumstances, it's good to be able to show a long history of prompt payments, especially if you're getting ready to apply for one of these two things: a mortgage or a car loan. Paying off a small home equity line will rob you of that payment history and hurt your score. It's okay to hold on to the debt in short term until you're set with your big ticket credit maneuvers, and then pay it off when you anticipate having a quiet period. One last thing to remember about making your payments is that the amount you owe doesn't really matter if the debt goes into delinquency or default. Let me explain. Defaulting on a $100 medical debt hurts just as much as defaulting on $10,000 worth of credit card debt. Did you hear that? The extra credit card debt obviously hurts more when it comes to utilizing the percentage, but the whack in your score comes from late payments is the same no matter the amount. And since your payment history makes up the biggest percentage of your score, that's a very important factor to keep in mind. So if you fall into delinquency, whether over $100 or $10,000, they're both going to do the same damage. Think about that. All right, next section is amounts owed. This category is one that might seem simple, but it is actually often misunderstood. It stands to reason that if you owe a lot of money, you're going to be considered more of a credit risk than someone who owes less money. But curiously, that's not exactly true. What credit card companies care more about is your utilization rate, or the percent of your available credit you're actually carrying from month to month. For example, if you have 3 credit cards with a total limit of $10,000 and you carry a balance of $1,000 forward, your utilization rate would be 10%. Why does this matter? Because you might owe the same $1,000 as the next 2 people in line with you at Starbucks, but if the first person has $1,000 in available credit and the second person has $100,000, All of your situations are very different. If you have a very large credit limits and no debt on your credit cards, you'll be seen favorably for your low utilization rate, but you could raise red flags for how deeply into the hole you can find yourself in not much time. In other words, if you're carrying 3 cards with a total limit of $50,000 and you have a zero balance on any of those 3, the lenders might just be considering how much total debt you have access to before giving you access to more. So if you have a high ability of debt available to you and you aren't using it, they're taking a look at that to see if we add more, then if you run both of those up, how much is that actually going to be? Just to be clear, I'm not suggesting you'd have a bad credit score under the scenario, but adding more potential debt just because you qualify for it isn't always the right or the best strategy. I don't have a specific rule of thumb about what kind of income you should have in relation to your credit lines, but I do use one measuring stick. For each card, you should have a personal limit that you would use no more than 25% of unless you were in an emergency. That is, if you have a $10,000 limit card, for example, you should be thinking about carrying no more than $2,500 on it month to month. If you carry more, you should be thinking about getting another card to distribute the balance over 2 cards. If you do carry balances on your cards, bear in mind that you will start to negatively affect your score once you carry over the first dollar of balance. That means you shouldn't be carrying a balance near your credit limit on one low limit card while carrying small balances on other credit cards. For example, if you have 3 cards with a total of $20,000 in credit, allocated at $2,000 a limit for one card, $10,000 for another, and $8,000 for the third, you will get hit up with a 50-point penalty if you carry $2,000 on the $2,000 limit card and 0 on the other 2, versus distributing your debt proportionally across your 3 cards. That's because the creditor who is giving you the low limit card isn't concerned about the debt you're carrying on your other cards. It's only interested in getting paid on that specific debt on the card. And if you're maxed out on that card, you will show up as a risk. You'll get a good grade from the other 2 creditors, but will take a hit from the low limit one. Creditors don't know what your income is, so they have no way of knowing if a high utilization rate is a problem for you or not. Extremely wealthy clients often come to me looking for answers about their low credit scores, and after some digging, we usually find that they have a random low limit credit card like a Macy's card or a mobile card that has a high balance on it. The high utilization rate on that one card can be enough to cost you your credit score in the top tier, which is a painful situation when you're looking to secure a multi-million-dollar loan, but you can't because of your mobile gas card. If you're getting ready to make a big ticket purchase like a home or a car, you need to be even more strict about your credit utilization. 0 balances are best, but staying under 10% in the 90 days leading up to closing on those loans is generally going to let lenders see you as safe. Length of your credit history. You can think of your length of credit history as your letter of reference. If you've had a long relationship with a bank through a mortgage or with a credit card company through your card, it shows that you have been a stable, responsible customer. That's valuable for a creditor to see. Of course, everybody has to start somewhere, which is why it's important to get in the game as soon as possible, even with a low limit secured card backed by the funds in a checking account. The more that account ages over time, the better it looks on your credit report. So, what exactly is the overall impact of the length of your credit history? Accounts that are under 6 months old have virtually no positive impact on your scores and can actually hurt them if you've already missed payments or have charged up the balances. Once you've had an account open for a year, you will start to see a 30 or 40 point gradual trickle of improvement to your scores. By the time an account has remained in good standing for 7 years, the full time a legitimate credit report measures, you're getting the total benefit of that history. Many clients come with what they think is a solid plan for getting out of financial trouble, and it involves paying off and closing their credit cards. Reducing debt is great, but closing accounts that you've had for a long time is almost never a successful strategy. Even if you don't use that department store card since you've had since college, the positive payment history you have on it for all those years is worth its weight in gold. Canceling after zeroing out the balance will actually hurt you more than paying off the balance helped you. Remember, shutting down a credit card on which you have had a long and consistent financial history of paying your bills is not necessarily a good idea. As a result, the best strategy is to protect your longest lived accounts with good payment history and make them the backbone of your credit mix. If you do need to add a variety of credit lines, which we're about to discuss, be selective about where you add and subtract. So, let's talk really quickly about variety of credit. Evaluating your credit mix is a lot like evaluating a prospect for the NBA draft. If a player can shoot really well but doesn't have any other skills, he is seen as a one-dimensional player and graded accordingly. Similarly, if you have a bunch of credit card amounts but no mortgage, car loans, school loans, or any other kinds of installment debt, the FICO algorithm will see you as equally one-dimensional and ding you accordingly. We'll talk more about building the best mix of credit lines in the next chapter, but in general, you should have 5 to 7 open lines of credit, and those lines should include at least one example of a revolving account, i.e. credit card, an installment account, such as a car or student loan, and ideally a mortgage. If you're a young person just getting into the game or you're saving for your first house, you're obviously not going to be able to show a mortgage loan. In that case, it's crucial to have some other accounts with at least 5 years of age and a clean payment history. So, next time we will talk about new credit, and we'll talk about the scores, identification, and our summary. All right? So, hopefully I have said something today for you, especially if you do have those credit cards and you do have them open. I think he gave you some very, very helpful tips. If you're thinking about closing your credit cards, the ones that you have good payment histories on, I think he has said something about think again about that decision. All right, we're going into our last reading for today out of The Capitalist Code. It Can Save Your Life by Ben Stein. The Genius of Warren Buffett. Remember, Ben Stein tells us how basically how he got into investing almost accidentally into Berkshire Hathaway, and how Warren Buffett becomes his personal mentor. So he's getting ready to tell us a little bit about the genius of Warren Buffett and value investing. And then we're moving to his chapter 4, which is called A Glory of Life. And he's going to talk about investing, about your bills, the importance of education. We may get through that. And then we'll close there for today. The genius of Warren Buffett. Berkshire Hathaway was run in majority measure by the supernova genius Warren Buffett, whom I mentioned above. He was a megastar at investing and in finding great uses for the stockholders' money. Genius doesn't even take it anywhere far enough. He was uniquely talented at investing. He had started Berkshire Hathaway, also known as BRK, as an investment partnership in about 1967. His first few investments were not wild successes, but soon he was hitting one home run after another. An investment of a few dollars in BRK had become worth thousands of dollars. He had a true gift for investing, such as had not seen before. In large part, this came from his brilliance at insurance. He had bought a number of insurance companies, and all of these used what is called float. That's the money the premium payers had paid in, which the insurer got to hold onto until it was paid in death benefits or car accident payments. Most insurers use this float to buy ultra-safe investments like treasury bonds, but Buffett used a large part of his float to buy stock in companies he liked. His gift for this was fantastic. Soon, he was manufacturing money. His stock, which had started trading in 1967 at about $12 a stock, was, when I came upon it in 1978, at $1,000 a stock. I bought a small amount and started to get his famous stockholders' letters. The letters offered brilliant insights into how the world works, but one point was made over and over by Mr. Warren Buffett. Mr. Buffett and his co-host Charlie Munger, vice president of BRK, regarded us stockholders as their partners. They wanted us to hold on to their stock forever, experience the growth, and not trade in and out of it. They used the same principle in their own stock buying. They bought companies in which they wanted to be partners or owners of the whole thing forever, not just for a quick profit. Frankly, I did not find it convincing. The news was made by people who did trade in and out for a quick buck. Could Mr. Buffett really be that much of a pal and brother to us little stockholders? It was hard to believe that it was anything beyond salesmanship. Besides, the major financial magazines, including my own beloved Barron's, were frequently bearish on BRK. They had all kinds of reasons why it was overpriced and bound to crash. Plus, the man who had suggested it to me said he was selling and I should sell too. I did sell some, but I lived to regret it bitterly. It turned out that Mr. Buffett was telling us the truth. He really was striving to create a money-making juggernaut for us small stockholders. For a salary of close to zero, he was allowing us little guys to ride his gravy train. We got to participate in the supreme money-making machine of BRK, and over time, it became a miracle. As I said earlier, I'm not a miracle worker. Warren Buffett is. Very importantly, while BRK definitely made money from the price action of his stock holdings, Mr. Buffett endlessly reminded us that he wanted us to think as owners of operating businesses and to get our earnings and growth in book value and not only in speculating. I had so little of BRK that it did not make me a rich man, but it did tell me that I should have been far more trusting of Mr. Buffett. And it also let me know that I was now allowed to be pre-dad in an amazing way. He's too young to be my real dad, but you get the point. Mr. Buffett has become my dad of investing. So now I have the Hathaways of the Los Angeles Athletic Club Company as my dads. And I have the ultimate Hathaway, Warren, as my ultimate dad. Still, while it has made me mildly well-to-do, it did not make me rich, and my eyes were still not fully seeing the light. In my pitiful, self-pitying way, I was missing a far bigger picture. I will try to explain it now. Here it is in a nutshell. Those of you who have that little ear icon, you can put that ear icon up there because he wants you to listen in to what he's about to say about free market capitalism. In a free market capitalist society, a highly disproportionate amount of the good things in life accrue to those who have financial capital. Now, all of us recognize this and know this. So then the question becomes, if the good things in life accrue to those who have financial capital, what happens to those who are shut out of building financial capital. Human beings who have nothing to sell but their labor, usually, not always, are the ones waiting on tables and cracking open the lobsters. Let me take a sip. Because he just said a mouthful. I'm going to say it again. Human beings who have nothing to sell but their labor, usually, not always, are the ones waiting on tables and cracking open the lobsters. What is he trying to tell us? He's trying to tell us that eventually human labor is going to be replaced. And it's either going to be, you're either going to be replaced by technology, or as a human being, you will have created a product that can keep you in the market beyond your personal human labor. I hope all of my millennials and Generation Zs are listening to what I just said. If not, you're going to find yourself in a hard place in the next decade. And they're already talking about this hard place. Millionaires are already talking about universal basic income. If you haven't heard the term, go look it up. Universal basic income. They're already talking about what are we going to do when we run out of jobs that are run by humans. Anybody heard recently about how Walmart is going to have all digital cash registers and you're going to be checking yourself out? All right. Think about how many jobs, human labor jobs, were just lost by that announcement. All right. And I know a lot of people are trying to fight this, but the reality is this is where the future is going. So you need to start thinking about, what is it that I can produce? What is it that I can create? What kind of field, even if I'm in a labor field, what kind of education do I need to go back and get to add some technology, to add some, Lady Judy said, yes, we do have some here already. What kind of education base do I need to be able to keep up with where the market is going? You need to be thinking about that. You don't need to wait till it gets up on you and then you're stuck. The men and women, he says, feasting at the tables were the capitalists. The men and women who only had their strong backs and weak or strong minds to rely on were just chaff in the wind of life. Let me say this again, because we need to hear this. We need to hear what people who already are on top are thinking about the rest of us. The men and women feasting at the tables were the capitalists. The men and women who had only their strong backs and weak or strong minds to rely on were just chaff in the wind of life. In other words, you're another body, you're another commodity to be consumed by the winds of life. Those who were anchored to capital were strong and fixed in comfortable spots overlooking the ocean. You already knew that, right? You know that it's great to have money. Life is entirely different, happier, secure, peaceful when you have money. Of course, the Bible teaches us, right, that we aren't to worship money. But the scripture also tells us that money answers all things. You don't know that scripture? You better go find it. All right? Money answers all things. And as my wise spiritual father said, money may not be the right answer to all things, but it does provide an answer. You are a whole new species as a rich or at least well-off person if you have money. You look different. You hold yourself differently. You are a rock instead of a grain of sand. A man or woman with capital is a happier man or woman. That may not be true when you're in college or in your 20s and your blood pressure is good and you can have all the romance you want. Then money is a second order. But when you get into your 30s and 40s, it's a whole different world. Money becomes extremely important in every way, especially in the way that you will take care of your future. Listen, with all of the health problems that I went through last year, let me tell you, it was a beautiful thing to be in a place where I didn't have to struggle so hard to take care of all the health bills that came our way. You're a better you if you have money. It's that basic. But what you don't know, or at least what many of you don't know, is that it just takes that great invention, a plan to get on the right side of history and to be the best thing you can be in a capitalist society, which is a capitalist. You don't have to be a predatory capitalist. We've seen what predatory capitalism does. Just look at our presidency. If Mr. Buffett and the Hathaways of Los Angeles could carry me on their backs, I could get there. But how? My dad was a genuinely great man, a genius economist and advisor to presidents and corporate chieftains. But he did not have a business to leave to me. Maybe he would leave me money someday, but that day was so unthinkably horrible, I didn't want to think about it. So how would I become this pre-dad? I could get there through the miracle of public corporations. It was and it is a fountain of good things for little people. What the Hathaways and the Warren Buffett of Berkshire Hathaway had to teach me was that they were the path. They're the path for people who care to get to the destination of financial security. They were the roadmap to getting in on billowing fountains of money being thrown off by the capitalist system. Money that irrigated the best crop in the world, prosperity. So he's talking about the importance of if you are a person who can't necessarily build a Fortune 500 company from the ground up, the next best thing he's saying is to get in on investing in a Fortune 500 company that's already been built from the ground up. Chapter 4, A Glory of Life. Do what you love, the money will follow. Marcia Senator. And I'm going to just read the first section here and then we're going to stop here for today. First, again, you have to have some money to invest. I think we made that clear, right? In order to have good credit, you got to have some money to spend, even after you get that approved credit line. And in order to invest, you have to have money to invest. So the bottom line on both of these is what? Somebody type it in. What is the connecting factor between capital and credit? You have to have what for either one? Somebody gonna type it in for me? Thank you. You have to have money. You have to have money. So I have to look around and I have to say, what is happening with my people group that is either restricting them from earning money? And then I have to say, if it's restricting you from earning money, then that means that you've got to use your mind and your creative ability to begin to create things that will bring you money. All right? You can't wait around. Yes, we know how much in debt our nation is to what we've already built. But the reality is our nation right now is still unrepentant, and they're unwilling to do what is right by our people. So what does that mean? Does that mean you just sit there and wait around? Or does that mean you get to using your mind and making money so you have capital to invest and you have money to build on this credit? All right? So you got to have money. Either way, you have to have money. First, you have to have some money to invest. There's an old Steve Martin skit from the early years of Saturday Night Live when it was actually funny. That was a long time ago. Steve Martin stands on the stage and says, "Want to know how to make $1 million and never pay any tax?" He pauses for a moment and then says, "First, get $1 million. Then don't pay any tax. When the IRS agent comes to the door, just say, 'I forgot.'" This is a joke, but there is also a big lesson here. Let's go back to the starting point. Where do we get that $1 million? For most of us, we cannot start with a letter to mom and pop asking for $1 million. Now, we know that our current president got, I believe, $1 million loan to start his businesses. All right. Most of us cannot do that. We don't have a parent to go to say, "Hey, flip me off $1 million." We have to earn some money and save a decent chunk of it. How do we do that? How in a world that endlessly tells you to buy, do you save? You get it into your noggin that if you don't save, you will suffer terribly later on in life. That's hard to do. It's similar to giving up drinking or smoking. It feels great to spend money. My son refers to it as retail therapy, and he's right. Buying something for yourself or someone else can change your mood. Just going to your favorite website, signing on, and buying something makes you feel better. Is it the feeling that someone is giving us? Is it the feeling that someone is giving us a present? Is it the feeling of power we have over the store clerk? Is it the shock of knowing that we own something new or used? Is it the feeling of being fortified in some way? We don't really know. We just know it feels great to buy goods and services. Alas, we also know that for most of us, it does not feel so great to get the MasterCard or Visa or American Express credit card bills. That's when we feel weak, exposed, and mortal. The bigger the bills, the worse we feel. That's just human nature. The pain is especially great if our bills are large in proportion to how much we earn or how much we have in the bank or our assets generally. So, as we close for today, how do we balance capital and credit, right? Most people are like, I want to get my credit score together, right? And most of us are like, I want to have an opportunity to do some investing. So how do we get it all together? How do we manage our cash, right? How do we build our credit? And how do we invest some of that cash and turn it into more cash and turn it into more capital? That is what we have been covering. That's what we're going to continue to cover. And as we continue to read, hopefully you will get some answers, right, for where you are right now. Because each of us are in different financial stages. Some of us are in different stages of life. Some of us are just starting out. So hopefully if you're just starting out, you're getting some good advice here and some good wisdom so that you don't make some of the mistakes that some of us who are older are now having to correct. All right. Think about with capital, right? With your money. Think about if you're in your 20s now, you're in your 30s now. That's still a very good time to invest, especially if you're in your 20s. And as Ben Stein was saying, looking for companies that you want to invest in and not trade off so quickly, but looking at companies that you want to invest in for life. And is it the kind of companies, as you do your research, that you can invest in for life, that you can stay with and grow with. We know, taking a look at our stock market, that every time number 45 tweets something that he shouldn't be tweeting, all right, it's causing people to lose money. Sometimes when people say the stock market goes down as much as it has, right? Some people call that a correction in the stock market. But if it keeps dropping, it's not going to be a correction anymore. It's going to be something else. All right. So even people who have been investing in a long time are getting concerned about some of the statements our president is making. And it's almost like he thinks this is a game, right? Ooh, let me see what I can say today to cause the stock market to shift. That's not really good leadership, all right? But that's a whole other topic. So this has been another Daring Dialogues. I hope that I have said something today that was helpful to you, to get you thinking about pulling out those credit cards. If you got a lot of them, you need to start pulling them out. All right. You need to start paying attention to what your percentage is on them. You need to start paying attention to your due dates, your balances versus your max amount. All right. Those are things that you need to be looking at, especially if you've had your card for a while and you have not looked at new terms. You haven't seen if your percentages and things have gone up. All right. Sometimes people don't pay attention to those things. They just keep paying the bill regularly if they've had a card for several years. All right. Those are things that you need to look at and pay attention to. All right. Remember, light is the most daring opposition to darkness. So please go out today and be light. I know some of us across the Midwest and all the way up into the East are getting ready to see another possible snowstorm roll through. So pray for us. Please be safe, whatever region that you're in. Make sure you pay attention to the weather, precautions. Pay attention to them. Also, thank you, Lady Evelyn. Happy Friday. I will be back sharing again with my Rise No Matter What series. And that's on Sunday. So you can join me live here, 2:30 Eastern Standard Time. All right. Take care, and remember, light is the most daring opposition to darkness. So go out and be light today. And if you're going to go out for the weekend, watch that spending. Take care, and God bless.